thanks everyone for joining today. We've got on the line our partner Atrium, which we want to thank for bringing this content to you today. Just a little bit of information about Atrium for those that aren't familiar. Atrium is a next generation consulting services company that helps organizations across diverse industries deliver on the promise of analytics and AI. They are a market leader in intelligent solutions, and they help organizations make smarter decisions and for those companies to be able to act on them. So to date, they're helping some peers at 3M, Avaya, and Xerox. So with that, I'll actually turn it over to Cris.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Really looking forward to spending some time with the team on the line here. Thanks for joining us today. Our agenda, so I'll plan on spending about 15 minutes giving you some perspective on trends, observations that we're seeing in the market. We've got a great technology overview that Nason will be giving us for roughly 15 minutes. And then Jeff Burns, as we mentioned, will help out with a customer story to put that in context for you all. And then hopefully we have some time for questions. Don't be shy with your questions. Please log them in the chat and we will try to get to all of them. So let's see, first topic, as far as trends that we're seeing. One, I would imagine several of you know the trends that I'll be presenting here, but I think it's good to kind of ground everybody in what we're seeing. Three big trends that are top of mind for our customers. One is just around data growth. And I think we all know this, but the proportionality of it is what is interesting to discuss. And so we've got a situation where data is growing at roughly 61% compounded every year. And we're talking about zettabytes at this point. And so we've got IDC there predicting that we will go up to 175 zettabytes by 2025. You may be asking yourself, what is a zettabyte? A zettabyte is a lot of zeros. And just to put it in perspective for you, the entire internet in 2009 would have been stored in a half a zettabyte. So the fact that we're going to 175, that's a lot of information, a lot of data that we're starting to capture across the globe. Second trend there is one that we also know. It's about movement towards compute power and public cloud. And by 2025, almost half the world's data will be stored in a public cloud. So we got a lot of data and we got a lot of compute power. What does that create? Creates quite a lot of opportunity, as the economist outlines in the third trend here, around what can AI do? And what we're seeing is AI come out of the theoretical academic landscape and into the corporate scene for real. And you've got the economists estimating that by 2021, we'll give them a couple of years there, even if they are off by a couple of years, but that by 2021, that augmented AI, and I think it's important that we look at that in quotes, will represent about a $3 trillion opportunity in business value to the global economy. And I think the word augmented AI is important because we're not talking about driverless cars here. We're talking about how do we make our teams more productive? How do we do a better job at customer retention, at forecasting, at which leads to call upon, all through assisted machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's for real, and that's happening today. So some big trends to think about. And as part of this discussion today, we want to help you think about how to put these to your advantage. Next slide. So I think Kristen talked a little bit about who we are as a company. Just so you know, we are a platinum consulting partner in the Salesforce landscape. And where we focus is that Venn diagram. So where the worlds of CRM strategy meet platforms like Salesforce with a discipline around data science and analytics, where programs where you have an interest in evolving your systems into intelligent systems, that's where we focus. And you can see some of our customers here. We tend to focus in the Fortune 1000, and our customers typically ask us to help them across a broad spectrum of needs, from helping to ideate what's possible, to putting in place strategy roadmaps, to implementing those, as well as to helping them to do the care and the feeding and the optimization of the programs that we are putting in place. So that's just a little bit about us. Now, what are some of the specific trending that we've seen over the last 9 months? I like this diagram, this illustration, because I think it represents a journey that all of us have been on since the pandemic. And it's kind of the journey of what we experienced through a disruptive crisis. And I think if we were to rewind the clock back to March, April, pretty much we were all in phase one of this, which being in a mode where it's very defensive posture, trying to figure out how do we get to tomorrow, very much react and respond. The customers we're working with right now, I would say predominantly are in like phase 3, phase 4. And so those that are kind of already rebounding to the realities of their future and accelerating into those. And so the companies that are in that mindset right now, there's like 5 trends that I'd like to call out for those listening here for you to be aware of. And so the first trend that we're seeing in common across those companies that are kind of moving forward is it's really around descriptive analytics. And so that's the first pattern. Melissa, let's go to the next slide there. So I think this is a bit of, it's more just kind of a reminder, and maybe it's more of an emphasis point on how much emphasis we are seeing around descriptive analytics. And so I think descriptive analytics have always been at a premium, even more so today. And we're seeing a lot of companies redoubling their efforts around investments in descriptive analytics. And they're really trying to figure out like, what are the pre and post COVID data patterns that they can operationalize their businesses around. And so that really is the key. And I would say every customer situation that we're kind of entering ourselves into, there is, and I think hopefully everybody this resonates with, there has been some significant change, whether that's the demographics of who is buying, whether that's the way that they're buying or the vehicles that are reaching them effectively at this point in time, whether certain industries or segments are hotter than others. Those are all things that we're all contending with. And descriptive analytics is a great way to start the journey around intelligent systems and kind of understanding your environment. So that's kind of pattern one that we're seeing. The second trend that we're seeing among those companies that are kind of rebounding into their new realities is this concept of data platforms and investment in data, and data going broad and data going more enterprise versus operational. And what we have in front of you here is a architecture of a Salesforce Einstein program linked up with Snowflake. And we show it because it's very representative of the type of architecture discussions we're having with the broader ecosystem. And what our customers are seeing is that investment in broader data platforms like a Snowflake, which Salesforce works very closely with from an R&D standpoint, are giving them access points to more benefit in their systems. And so I'll give you an example of that. Some of the use cases that we see a lot of, whether it's, I'll call out forecasting, for example, the notion behind the value you can do with a predictive forecast tends to grow significantly with the broader data sets that you can weave into it. So it's one thing to be doing a predictive forecast around sales opportunity data in Salesforce. It's quite another if you can weave in data sets that give you a true S&OP picture, right? From logistics, from supply chain, from finance. And so we're seeing this kind of union of data platforms helping to create more impact and value out of analytics and machine learning and those investments that are being made. So that's the second trend that we're seeing. The third trend is more of a finer point on the journey that companies are experiencing when they are investing in predictive analytics. And so we're seeing a number of companies that are putting in place their first predictive models. And what they're finding is that this is actually an example of kind of a before and after. This is an example of a model progression over the course of roughly 18 months with one of our customers. And what you'll see is that the models themselves are getting more intricate and going deeper. And by that, this is an example of a customer where they were interested in improving their lead conversions and doing a better job of predicting lead conversions. They had, I think, almost 300,000 leads coming in every month. And they didn't necessarily have a team that could proactively act on what was the most likely to close. So putting in place a algorithm to help manage that and give them guidance on where to focus time meant a tremendous value add to them. And so what started as a fairly blunt force object on the left, which was one lead scoring model, has since then turned into models that have much more specificity. So lead scoring models by business unit, by geography, in some cases by specific customers. And what you can see is these models are all orchestrated to work together across different platforms, but leveraging Einstein in a way that delivers insight and actionability to this company. So this is a journey that if you're starting to kick tires and think about, well, how do I want to do predictions within my business? This is typically a journey that we see companies going through. All right, fourth trend that we're seeing is really around kind of organizational, I'll call it organizational self-awareness, benchmarking. We're spending a lot of time with companies helping them understand where their starting point is. And we've helped to adapt a maturity curve so that companies that want to invest in upgrading their systems to be more intelligent understand what each of those stages look like. And the questions that we typically get from our customers are, where am I on the spectrum? How much work effort would it take to go from point A to point B? What is the value if I do? And so we're spending a lot of time coaching companies to really think about, it's not just about moving up the spectrum, but identifying the outcomes that are going to be associated with that. And I think the most important word on this slide that I would highlight for everybody on the call is the word actionable. And if you'll read about sometimes that, there's challenges with AI adoption. How do you make these programs successful? There's definitely some common things that you should be thinking about when you want to set yourself up for success. And one of the biggest ones in my mind is, how do you make sure that all the work that you're doing in harvesting these insights and doing these predictions, if you go down that path, how are they actionable? And how do you make them actionable in the organizational workflow of your business? And how do you make them actionable at scale? Because that's really where these programs come to life. So that's the fourth trend. And the fifth and final one, before I hand it over to give you a bit of a technology overview, we often get asked questions around, well, what are the use cases? What are you seeing out there? And I don't think anybody will have a challenge necessarily in coming up with the list of use cases. If anything, I think the bigger challenge is, how do you focus on the right ones? And wanted to highlight for the crew that's on this call what we're seeing in the CRM space and what we're seeing as the most common high traffic AI use cases, if you will. And it kind of groups into three categories where we're seeing a lot of investment. Companies are trying to figure out, how do they adapt AI to helping with their customer acquisition programs? So again, think about like things related to lead scoring. And so that's one big kind of theme that we're seeing across the market. Another theme that we're seeing is, how do we take machine learning and AI and apply that to helping to retain our customers? So anything around attrition and retention tends to be a very popular use case, and one that can create value very quickly if you run the business case on it. And then the third is anything around predictive forecasting. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but a lot of companies interested in helping to get a better, more predictive forecast from their sales teams. And sometimes it's not just about calling the right number, but it's also about, how do I take a look at the characteristics of my pipeline and then give advice back and actions, next best actions back to my team, to not only just call the right number, but to improve our win rates. And so those are three themes that we see consistently over the last several months from companies and their interest levels. So those are, hopefully you feel good about understanding some of the trends that we're seeing. And I'm going to hand it over to Nason to talk about some of the platform and how we bring this to life in a platform like Tableau. Nason, over to you.
Fantastic. I am excited to share with you a bit about the technology, about the goals that we've got in terms of a roadmap, and hopefully to give you an idea of where this technology may lead you. as we were hearing, there's a huge opportunity out there with understanding our customers better, whether that's predictive, whether it is descriptive. There are so many things going on so fast right now, and we are all struggling to understand how we can best adapt to a new business environment where, frankly, most of our customer interactions are all ones and zeros. But I will go back and say this challenge of bringing together a unified analytics platform at Salesforce is not something that has just been recently thought about. Way back in the day, when I was at Business Objects in 2005 and the App Exchange was just getting started, uh, I was one of the team that built the first basically business objects analytics for App Exchange that was riding on top of Salesforce. And I sat down with Mark Benioff at the time, and he laid out this vision. He said, Nason, I want our people, our customers, to be able to reach through the data, to see their own customers, to get better at what they do. And it did take a while, but I think we've got the absolute winning combination at this point. And the question really is, how do we bring together the best of what is native inside the Salesforce platform? And that's now called Tableau CRM. Used to be called Einstein Analytics, so now Tableau CRM. How do we bring that native platform goodness together with the enterprise-wide goodness that we've seen for years from Tableau, so that we have the benefit of leveraging all of the data that now is connected to Tableau in the enterprise, and yet all of the data and all of the workflow and all of the experiences we see inside CRM, inside that Service Cloud or Sales Cloud. So let's explore that together. How are we going to bring that together over time? Well, here's what it looks like today. And it looks good, but it is separate. So on the left, we've got Einstein Analytics, now called Tableau CRM, but just so I don't confuse you by saying Tableau and Tableau CRM, I'm just going to call it Einstein Analytics for the next few minutes. On the left, you've got a platform which is native inside the Salesforce platform, has very strong AI and ML capabilities and Einstein predictions and discovery, so that someone who's not a data scientist can actually produce actionable insights. An analytics studio, so that people can build very compelling dashboards and analytics, the capability to prepare data with data prep and Spark ML, and the ability to host data, even if it didn't start from or originate in the Salesforce Cloud in the EA data store. Well, over on the right, you've got basically the same thing, except it's the Tableau platform. So we have Tableau Desktop that, for instance, would allow someone to do their analytics creation. We call that visual analytics. In this slide, you've got the self-service data prep, Tableau Prep, that does the data management, the embedded, the standalone viewing experience. We've got the hybrid query engine, which is called Hyper. So what you're seeing is both technologies at this point have roughly the same capabilities, but they're separate. And the question is, how do we bring them together? Well, let's take a peek. The first place that we can really enable customers to dive in and gain some goodness is right here in the AI and ML area. Now, Einstein predictions and discovery is an incredibly powerful way for us to create actionable insights that are also understandable by your average person. And that allows us to, for instance, today inside Salesforce, give someone a recommendation to a customer that might be able or might be interested in churning, for instance. Now, what if we could take that power and extend it inside Tableau? That is our first area of integration. And so we are taking the power of Einstein predictions and discovery and allowing people to embed that, whether it's in Tableau Prep when we're preparing a data flow to leverage the algorithms that we generate in Einstein predictions and discovery, whether it's embedding a prediction or an analytic inside a dashboard, the Tableau dashboard you've got today. That work is going on right now. And we've even got some prototypes. We've got some capabilities right now today to embed that. And what we're working on is making it easier and easier and easier. I'll show you some screenshots and some images of that as we go a little further. Well, the next step, if we can get this AI and ML platform across both the Tableau and the Einstein Analytics, the next step is definitely going to be to knit together the data. Today, you might have data that you've already plumbed into the EA data store. You might have data that you're already plumbed into with Tableau. So for instance, your ERP system, or maybe you've got a logistics database that you've got plumbed into Tableau. Well, what if we could take that data and integrate it so that inside Einstein Analytics or Tableau CRM, we could make that data available to a customer service agent right when they're talking to their customer? What if we could make that an actionable and in place, a really focused and targeted analytic that flows with the workflow that our Salesforce is using? Well, that's what we're going to do by knitting that data together. And then we start thinking about, well, our next stop has to be, once we get that done, can we allow for the visual analytics that's inside Tableau or inside Einstein Analytics? Can we take a component of a dashboard and just pick it up and make it visible on either side? So if you've got someone who's in Tableau, for instance, Tableau server, and they're looking at their cell phone, they're not in a Salesforce experience, they're, for instance, in a different experience. Could we take a Salesforce analytic and embed it so they could see it, or vice versa? Well, that's what we're doing there, and I'll show you some screenshots of that as well. And as we start to move further, can we take this embeddability that we've got? Now, today, if you think of Einstein Analytics, Tableau CRM, it is a native app inside the clouds, inside Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and so on. And that means you inherit all the goodness that comes with the security that you've already set up, the permissions, the in context, for instance, the knowledge that if I'm looking at this opportunity or I'm looking at this customer, I automatically want that view filtered. All of that goodness you get as a native app. Well, what if we could extend that so that any Tableau viz had the ability to be filtered and security context supplied and so on and so forth? Well, that's what we're working on the top end, and vice versa. What if you could take the actionability that you have in a Tableau dashboard today and apply those same actions, the same interactions, to something you've already built inside Einstein Analytics, Tableau CRM? Well, the last stop on our journey is pulling together prep as well. So I'll show you one quick prototype of this, but when we're talking about data prep, today it's two separate experiences, but why not bring those together? Why not provide the capability to access all that Salesforce data, all those native objects from within Tableau's data prep, and why not go the other direction as well and be able to take anything that Tableau prep is connected to in your entire enterprise today and simply massage it so that it's right and integrated with the data you've got in Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, so that you can present that in context in a native way to a user right when they're talking to a customer. So when we think of pulling all these together, the real main theme is this: we're focused on providing you a way to invest today, even before any of these integrations are out there, so that as you move forward, you'll be able to leverage the stuff that you work on, the stuff that you develop in either place, which means ultimately we're going to bring ourselves to a place where it all comes together. Let's take a quick look at 2 or 3 areas, just zoom in. One of them is the AI. So Einstein Discovery and Predictions will be coming out in Tableau's 2021.1 release, and it'll come out in 3 separate areas. The first is that we will be able to embed, in this case, an example is a return propensity, the 4% return propensity, right inside a Tableau dashboard. So now we're bringing predictive AI and ML that doesn't require a real heavy data science investment right there inside a native Tableau dashboard. What about the analytics extension? Well, what if you're just moving along through a data set and you're like, gosh, I wish I could see how all of this data would predict customer churn? Well, with Einstein Predictions and Discovery's algorithm being accessible as an analytics extension inside Tableau, it means we can do just that. We can apply those algorithms to data sets and in real time see predictions. The last is in Tableau Prep, where today people are preparing data sets for consumption or for analysis. We can now leverage those predictions in that data set to create a new column, if you will, a new column of data that is our prediction of what will happen. As we think about the data Specifically, 3 examples. We would like Tableau to be able to query EA data sets. So today you might be pulling in into Einstein Analytics, you might be pulling in huge amounts of data from around the enterprise and putting it together so that your customer facing folks can see that in real time. Well, why not leverage that and allow that to be accessible to Tableau as well? And what about the vice versa? What about allowing Tableau to have native Salesforce data access? That improves greatly the experiences of the folks who aren't inside Salesforce yet need access to that data. And finally, why not allow all of that data that all of the Tableau customer base has invested in integrating into Tableau? Why not allow all of that data to be accessible inside Einstein? So that when we're inside Salesforce and we want to provide our customer-facing people an inflow, a native experience that lets them have the right knowledge to suggest to one of their customers the right course of action or be aware of all of the aspects of their customer. And when we say all the aspects, we're talking about a customer 360 view inside Salesforce. Well, we enable that by allowing Tableau Prep to write to Einstein to bring the goodness of all that data into Einstein Analytics. And the unified authoring, what might that look like? Well, here's a prototype, and you might not notice because it just looks kind of like one dashboard. But over there on the left, you've got this bubble chart, and it turns out that this bubble chart is generated by Tableau. And yet this entire analytics studio is a Tableau CRM, what we used to call Einstein Analytics dashboard. So we'll natively be able to say, hey, we want a new chart type. We want a Tableau chart type. And let me go ahead and do that right here in Salesforce, right in the Analytics Studio, and integrate the visual experiences, the dashboard experiences. So when we bring it all together, in brief, what we're saying is we need our customer-facing people to know everything about their customers at the right time in context so that they know what to say, what to do to give their customers the best experience. And that's what we're creating. This vision that all of the data that you're interacting with and have plumbed into Tableau is now going to be accessible inside Tableau CRM. And vice versa, all of that goodness that you've got that's inside Salesforce and the various clouds that you might want to leverage outside, we're going to allow that to happen. And that is the take-home message. You can start today, you can get involved right now, and as these capacities, these capabilities come online, you'll see that they'll knit together to leverage those investments of time you've made to give you more and more return. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and let's turn it back over.
All right. Thank you, Nason. Thank you, Cris. Lots of food for thought as we think about kind of the trends we're seeing in the market and how Salesforce is addressing those trends, bringing together kind of the best of both worlds across Einstein, Tableau, and core Salesforce platform. So hi, everyone. Jeff Burns here, VP Customer Success at Atrium. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're working through some of these things with our customers. One thing that I think it's important to ground ourselves in is when we think about systems of intelligence, when we think about what the intelligent experience means, it is surfacing that predictive or prescriptive insight natively in context of where people are working so they can make better decisions. And then we've got an action framework associated with that, right? We're going to take some kind of action. We're going to do something better and more effectively in having visibility to that insight. And having all of that captured and reported and acted on natively within the Salesforce platform. Very important concept. So with that, let's talk about a few customer examples here. We'll start with CooperVision. And the journey with CooperVision actually started a few years ago. And often, you know, it's important for us to think of these types of initiatives more as kind of data-driven programs as opposed to kind of one and done projects. I think you'll all find that as you embark upon your journeys. So a few years ago, we started with CooperVision. At the time, they're on Salesforce Classic with roughly 1,500 global sales and customer service team members. For those of you who don't know CooperVision very well, they're the #2 contact lens manufacturer in the world. They serve eye care practices globally. I don't think there's a region that they don't exist in. And their journey really began with a recognition that Salesforce had been implemented more as a tool for managers to measure performance of their field and their organization versus an effectiveness tool, right? Versus a system of intelligence where the system was providing insights to help the organization be more effective and make better decisions. So the goal was really to transition Salesforce and the mode of operating in a customer-facing set of roles to transition into delivering actionable insights that sales and customer services could act on to be trusted advisors to their eye care practitioners, right? That's really the goal. And the first step that CooperVision took here was really test it out, right? They took the pilot approach. And so in their case, it was a stand-up of Einstein in one region in North America. And it was really for the purpose of, let's see if we can really provide better visibility to our sales teams around what our customers are buying, what are their order patterns across time periods, how do they like to buy across product categories. How can we get a better view of what our customers' business is with us compared to what their peers are? And in the process of doing that, understand what the cross-sell opportunities are. CooperVision's a business partner to their eye care practitioners, by the way, right? Those eye care practices resell those contact lenses. And so by being able to advise their customers on where they have opportunity to grow their business using CooperVision products, CooperVision becomes a trusted advisor to the eye care practitioner. So the goal was really to turn those sales reps into trusted advisors, enable them to roll into their customers' offices or web conferences, as it were, and be able to make insightful recommendations on how CooperVision can help their customers improve their business. Wildly successful initial first pilot. Productivity savings, but more importantly, it drove a different conversation. And that was successful enough where CooperVision kind of zoomed out and said, okay, well, this is great. How do we think about this globally? And how do we think about this on an expanded set of use cases so we can differentiate on ease of doing business across our customers globally? And so the things that they looked at and that we looked at with them as part of a strategy project were better utilization of programs and promotions across products, across regions, pricing optimization, order to delivery excellence. How can we be a better partner by guaranteeing on-time order to delivery? You know, it's one of those environments where there's plenty of competitors out there, right? So if we're not a reliable business partner delivering on time, you know, that's a customer sat issue, and that's kind of the number one driver for why customers work with them. As well as sales effectiveness insights. How do we help the sales team, you know, not just to measure against performance metrics, but to do a better job of being able to get to their number more efficiently and effectively. And in the process of doing all this, CooperVision knew that it needed to be able to do this with data as opposed to adding headcount globally. They knew that that was the opportunity for them in the process. So we took a look at their strategy globally, came up with a set of recommendations. And one of the things that we found together was that there was a lot of opportunity where processes needed to be harmonized across regions. A lot of times success in global AI and analytic initiatives is about bringing together processes and data standardization across regions, right? That's part and parcel of going from operational data store to global enterprise data goes broad. And that was part of the recommendation here. We're now working with CooperVision on a Salesforce Lightning upgrade, embedded analytics. We've got Tableau, enterprise Tableau embedded for enterprise combined data sets. We've got Einstein, where we're surfacing predictions inside of Salesforce with Salesforce data, all in one unified experience enabled through Lightning with standardization on data and process across their three big regions, Americas, Europe, and APAC, as well as LATAM. And that's a little bit about CooperVision. So lots to think about there, really interesting journey for them. US Foods is an interesting one where they had a lot of really interesting pieces of architecture in place, kind of ahead of some of the announcements that we've seen from Salesforce over the last year. So US Foods is a heavy user of Tableau. They were a heavy user of Salesforce, longtime Salesforce customer. Also standardized on Snowflake for cloud data warehousing. And so they had these pieces kind of all in somewhat silos for purposes of the types of use cases that we're embarking on with them. And what they recognized was that they had a lot of performance reporting around at the customer level, at the sales level, coming out of their enterprise data warehouse, but it was not connected to Salesforce. They also recognized that they needed to do a better job, similar to CooperVision, of transitioning Salesforce from kind of a performance compliance management tool into a sales effectiveness tool. The big recognition there was that they were missing the last mile, right? The swivel chair between what am I doing in the moment in Salesforce, and then all my reporting. That disconnect created a disconnect of adopting the insights and using them in real time in the flow of the normal course of business. So US Foods invested in Tableau CRM Einstein to really take those insights and surface them natively within Salesforce. Now, to their benefit, because they were already on the Snowflake architecture, what we're able to do there is we're able to take those combined data sets that can be surfaced within Tableau, they can be surfaced within Salesforce natively with Einstein in Salesforce, and you've still got a single source of truth. Right? So some of the concepts that Nason was talking about are real today between Salesforce, Tableau, Einstein, using tools like Snowflake. So US Foods is realizing the benefit of that. They also have a distributed AI environment, a federated set of models that exist not just on the Salesforce platform, they exist within Snowflake, they exist in a number of different areas. And so by virtue of this architecture, we're able to bring these insights, surface them in a simple way to the sales teams and enable them to do things like understand customer buying patterns across their product categories. As you can imagine, US Foods, #2 food distributor in the world, focused on restaurants, right? It's kind of ground zero. So for them, it's about being able to react and respond quickly to customer needs based on changing conditions, and then being able to recommend what products that customers could be buying while still interpreting their demand signals in real time, right? So that's the use case that US Foods is going after, and that's the architecture that we're working on out there. So just phenomenal set of tools and what's available to us today versus just a couple of years ago. That's a little bit about US Foods. Let's talk about how we get started. In most cases, this is really the step that customers will take, particularly if you've been on Salesforce for a while and you're trying to think about, gosh, how do I just start getting value out of my existing investments? Well, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll start with an intelligent experience workshop. And kind of the 5 things that we really focus on in that workshop are understanding the organization, understanding where we have barriers across roles that serve our customers in our organization. What are those pain points, right? What are those opportunities where we can drive improvement? For those roles, those functions within our organization, what are the questions that we're trying to answer? What, if we answered those questions, how would that be differentiated in our go-to-market operations? From there, we can align across those roles, across those departments, across those functional areas, speak a common language, understand a common set of metrics. And then we can start to think about, well, how do we action that? How do we action that to drive value across our organization, right? We start to define our outcomes and the specific actions that we will take that will drive those outcomes. And then we go through a data exploration exercise. So do we have the data that's going to enable us to move this forward? Can we produce the insights that we need out of that data, whether they be descriptive, predictive, or prescriptive, if I said that right? And in understanding that, we're able to develop a roadmap, right? And often what we do is we work with our customers across a maturity curve where we start with, hey, look, let's get some quick wins out there. And then we can progress our process and our data set as we drive adoption up that data-driven maturity curve. And ultimately that drives adoption of our CRM systems of Salesforce. The outputs that typically will come from these workshops, so we'll develop a journey map, right? We need to be able to visualize how we'll work differently. We'll develop prototypes, wireframes. Can we visualize what that experience will look like in Salesforce? And then what outcome are we after, right? What's the value that we're really going to drive? How are we going to measure that? Good news is that we're working with data, right? So when we go through this process, we get to actually empirically measure our outcomes. And we could talk more about how we do that. So that is a very quick run through of a couple customer examples and a typical way to get started through this. And I think what I'd like to do is open it up for some questions. So Brayden, do we have any questions coming in?
We do, yeah. Thanks, Jeff. So one question I'd like to, Nason, get your take on, and then Jeff, you can definitely pile in with some of the customer examples. So Michael's asking, if Einstein and Tableau become more integrated, why use both? Why not just pick one and not have to support both? So Nason, from a technology perspective, we'd love your point of view, and Jeff, again, give us some color commentary.
I think the value that we get right now when we take data and put it in an actionable way in front of a customer-facing employee is huge. And today, the best way to do that, if you're invested in Salesforce's core clouds, is going to be to do that with Einstein Analytics. If you've got experiences where your folks are outside of Salesforce, then it makes sense to go ahead and do that with Tableau. So the reason it makes sense to continue with both of those is that they serve a different population at a different time in a different way. When they are integrated, the good news is whatever you develop in either platform will then come together so that you have even better efficiencies. But the reality is the market is moving fast. Our customers really want someone who understands them. And today, the way to do that is with the combination of Tableau CRM and Tableau.
Yeah, and I'm going to pile on to that. I think with the example, I think US Foods was actually a really good example of when you use each tool. So, as you recall, in the US Foods example, they had a lot of these insights surfaced within Tableau in kind of a centralized place, but they weren't well adopted, right? They weren't adopted for folks that needed to act on that information quickly at scale. And so Einstein was really the tool to create that native experience, that intelligent experience where we bring the insights together in context of a process where people are working and driving an action framework off that. That was kind of the unique elements that drove the need to use Einstein or Tableau CRM in that context. But there was still a need to surface those insights broadly across the organization outside just the go-to-market teams, across supply chain, across logistics, across finance. And Tableau is absolutely the tool to continue using for that. The trick was to have a single source of truth, and that's where the Snowflake architecture came into play.
Another question came in direct to me, probably something we hear pretty frequently, but as we think about AI and ML and the integration across the two platforms with Tableau and Tableau CRM, what if we already have a data science team? How do we work with them to make sure that we're getting the most out of investment in Tableau CRM?
So I might jump in on that one real quick. What I'm seeing is that you've got usually a data science team. I've got one customer, for instance, who has come up with their own body of algorithms. They've got a bunch of stuff in Jupyter notebooks. They say, well, we want these folks to be working on these really big, hairy problems and proprietary stuff. But when I ask them how their average data worker, someone who is an analyst or who works with data all the time but isn't quite a data scientist, how that person leverages data science, they say we don't have a good way. And I think that's where we find Einstein predictions and discovery really shines. It's this idea that someone who knows the data or who's knowledgeable about the situation would be able to leverage a technology, get started, do a lot of the heavy lifting on predictions and discovery, and maybe they would ask the data science team to collaborate and validate, but that's a much easier thing for a data science team to do. And the software's been designed for that. For instance, if I do, as a non-data scientist, a bunch of work, it delivers a model that's in the most common programming platform, an R model, so that I could walk over to a data scientist and say, look at this, look what I've done. So it's this great entree, this ramp that allows someone who's not a data scientist to do amazing work. And I think that's where I see the sweet spot.
Great. Okay, thanks. One more question here, and then again, we can wrap it up unless any others come in. But how do you get started with Tableau CRM and predictions? Is there a minimum level to kind of get in, and from a data perspective, and are there use cases that fit using that Tableau CRM maybe than others? So would love, Nason, for you to give your insights, and then Jeff, I know you hit on it, maybe just give a couple examples of how specifically people get started.
You know, the easiest way is to hit the trailhead, get yourself accustomed to how you get data in. I would just dive in. It is not a difficult technology to learn. It's very easy. And the real trick here is get your hands dirty, have some fun with it. Start with a business problem. And to answer your question about where's the best bang for your buck, ask yourself, where is one interaction, customer interaction, that happens a lot, for instance, that's very common in our organization, where if we could improve outcomes, we would move the needle from a business perspective. Find that one place and then sit down on a piece of paper and just say, what data could I provide my people that would let them make better decisions? Maybe even a prediction or a discovery kind of application. Maybe it's just looking at data. But find that intersection that happens a lot, where it has the potential to move the needle with your customers, and you'll be looking at a good problem that you can solve very easily, and then dive into the tech, and you'll find you've got partners like Atrium and others that are out there that can really help you make it happen.
Great. Okay. Another question just came in from a panelist. Curious how all this plays into the Salesforce community. Is there parity where these features can also be leveraged to extend to partners and customers? So, Jeff, if you've seen the experience or had any experience there from our days here at Atrium, Nason, any ideas there would also be great to share.
So the answer in a word is yes. We can always dive in and you know, kind of give you that demo or show you how it works. But yeah, the answer is yes. The data's all there. The experiences are accessible. It's really just a matter of again, finding that business problem you want to solve and diving in.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of our customers, so if we're talking Salesforce communities like customer communities, partner communities, and so forth, all of these capabilities can be extended out through Salesforce communities as well. And a lot of our customers will start with internally facing capabilities, prove them out before extending them out through their communities capabilities. But that really leads to kind of the last question as well, in terms of how we get started. There's kind of this perception out there in the market that, gosh, we got to get our data perfect, or we got to standardize everything across the board before we can even get started. 9 times out of 10, you've got a path to get started, and it takes less data than you think, and it takes a narrower data set than you think. And so really the trick is, let's focus first on those outcomes, as Nason said. Let's explore those data sets and see what's available to us, and just start doing the data signal analysis, right? And that's where we often work with our clients as a first step. And once we know what we're after, once we know it's going to provide value, we look at that data feasibility, we look at that signal analysis. With many of our early lead management, lead qualification and scoring, or with many of our early forecasting implementations, we found that, you know, as few as 6 to 10 fields on an opportunity or on a lead could be predictive for us as a minimum viable product, just to get something out there, get it in use, get some initial value, paired and contextualized in a set of analytics that are easy to understand to provide context for that prediction. That's where that minimum value comes from. Now, as you start to get usage of those analytics, as you get usage of those insights and those predictions, you can do so in a way where you can start to capture more data, build that data set, continue to explore. And that's where we get into, you know, more precise, more predictive, more prescriptive types of insights delivered through Einstein and Tableau and Salesforce. And so it's really just about starting the journey. It's simpler than you think. And once you kind of get a couple of iterations deep in that, you can then start to get that surfaced out directly to customers through communities.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Again, as you can see on the screen, we'd love to continue the conversation with you. Lots of great stuff here and more to come. Please register for an event we are hosting on December 16th, where we're going through a more practical step guide to get you started. on or continue on your analytics journey, feel free to reach out to Tim and schedule an intelligent experience workshop with us. And of course, follow us with Thought Leadership on LinkedIn. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists, our partners over at Salesforce, and I hope everyone has a productive and fun Dreamforce to you this year. Thank you very much and have a great day.